His mother, the celebrated Emmeline Stankhurst, will accompany on the pianoforte.
Folks, it's time for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Take it away, guys.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mecky.
We're live from the City Studios in Australia. Jump into the chat room at freedomslips.com while we're on air. You can listen to us from there. And also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Our website, shinysideout.net, has all the show archives, notes, and links we paste into the chat during the show. Mecky knows how you can listen to us. If you live in Kentucky, you can listen to us on FM, WZZR 101.3. You can get an app, Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn.com, Radio Tuner, Spreaker.com, iHeart, Live 365, and our own app written by me, Shiny Side Out. At home, you can listen to us on a Grace Tabletop digital radio or driving around in a General Motors vehicle with a receiver-enabled radio. All are revolutions in radio. You can buy the 2013 season on CD of your favorite host. Please do that. It costs about $30 and half goes to the host. Check that out on the station's website. It's pretty cool. I suggest you get into that. We've also got this weekend, we have an auction. I'm going to refer you to the auction site very soon. Also, if you are in the US of A, you can call in on 347-688-2902 or add Freedom Screen to Skype. Solaris Mecky. Solaris had an awesome show yet again.
What a surprise. What a shock.
She is such a solid host, bringing in such good, solid guests. Mecky, what show number are we at?
We are 220 and 100. 220 and 100. That's 122 for you guys that don't want to count like I do. It certainly is an achievement. 122. That's right. That's not 11 times 11. No. But it's certainly a privilege and a pleasure. In fact, last week was 11 times 11, and it's been a blast. 2 years. Well, in fact, well over 2 years by now. Lots of interesting guests, very fascinating discussions, great contributions from the chat room as always. Throughout the entire 2 years that we've had, and a whole bunch of topics which we hope you guys have enjoyed and have broadened your horizon.
Do you know, Mecky, I keep looking back to those topics and I can't believe all the things we've spoken about.
Right?
Yeah, I know. Mecky, I didn't think I was going to make it here for the show today, only because I'm not going to say driving like a crazy person. I wasn't. I was driving according to the rules and the speed limits in my state.
Sure you
I was, I swear. And I've just been at the Tuggerah Lakes UFO meeting, and there's some video footage being put up there of some things. It was a great day, and if you live on the Central Coast or anywhere near us, please get to them. There's a Tuggerah UFO. Just look for that on Facebook. And I found out that, of course, my mother and my grandmother went to the Long Jetty UFO group back in the 40s, I think it was. So,
all right.
I've got to go. I've got to be there. I've got to be part of the family thing. So, outside of that, Mecky, it was a great discussion, and we obviously talked about UFOs a lot. There has been this week. There's been a few more YouTube videos that I've seen of UFOs doing this and that. and yet still, you know, the same fakery ones come up, and it really annoys me because it's the same one again. We've got so many followers now, and they're sending me personal messages saying, "Check this out. Can you check this out? Can you check?" I've got nothing else to do in my whole life and check out videos, and you know what?
Well, that's fantastic then, isn't it? Lucky you. Woo. For a second there, I thought it was an inconvenience.
No, it's not. It isn't, because at least I'm getting a shot in at looking at some of these things. And you know, I don't want to disappoint anyone, but you know, if it's like some of them are hello special effects, we can see your hand, or it was definitely CG'd. But it's so hard now to determine what's CG and what isn't. You know, it's pretty tough. And when something looks so authentic that I don't want to say it is, but you know, it's pretty tough. And you know this too, right?
I sure do, sir. Look, now technology. Now, look, the truth is this: technology has advanced so much that all the fakery that one encounters is in fact done to the degree that it is virtually impossible to detect. I mean, if you've got very sophisticated equipment, you know, and you got lots of money to spend and time as well, you can detect it. That's why I like to always look at old evidence, black and white pictures. You know, back in the olden days. When fakery was really not as sophisticated and it was fairly easily spotted. Of course, you know, I also like events that are witnessed by more than one person. That is always helpful, even though, you know, apparently that swamp gas can cause mass hallucinations, as we have heard before. You know, it's always those low-flying dodos, you know, when they're reflected in the swamp gas that cause the hallucinations, mass hallucinations, as it were. But look, that's true enough. Though, just quickly though, and we do have something great lined up for you guys today. So we will not be talking about the fiat currency and fractional reserve lending as we had said last week. So we're going to continue that next week. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be some more interesting, I guess, behind-the-scenes history for you there. But this week we've got something special. Before we go there, though, Dave, I have to say something.
Go ahead.
I was listening to the radio, as I do, because I like radio, in my car, and I was listening to ABC News. And at that point, I think I was listening to the BBC because, you know, they have sharing with NPR and so forth. And there was this lady on there. She was a professor for something or other, and I forget her name. But she said in her research, which had stretched for 30 years, she thinks that we should go to corporations and ask them nicely to be nice, right? So I thought to myself, well,
that's going to work.
And I thought, you know, she was very passionate, and the guy that was interviewing her in true BBC style was quite hard. So that was excellent, right? His questions were right on the money. But the honest truth is, I thought she was a little bit deluded, you know, because she really believed that if you engage the corporations at a proper level, and her argument was this, they would be nice. Her argument was this: it's all made up of people. Look, I'm working for a corporation, okay? And nothing drives the corporation more than the quarterly balance sheet and the share price. It's just how it is, okay? I'm sure corporations are good citizens or good corporate citizens when they you know, when it doesn't cost them anything.
I'm stabbing myself in the eye right now, Mickey. Haven't we previously described large corporations as psychopaths?
Well, we have, and they are, and that's why people that are psychopaths do really well in them. And in fact, I had a discussion about this with my friend of mine who is he's a doctor of clinical psychology, and you know, he actually treats people with brain injuries and so forth. And there's a whole bunch of stories he has around how the corporations would just get rid of you. You know, if you got an injury, well, it's too bad. We don't want to rehabilitate you. Let's get rid of you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that. I don't think we can just sit down with the corporation. In fact, whom should we sit down with in the first place? Because guess what? The corporation, while it is a legal person, is not an actual person, so you can't sit down with them. And it's very difficult to talk sense to a board of directors, you know, maybe a media spokesperson. I mean, who makes the final call in the end anyway? So I don't think the corporations will play nice. I don't think corporations are here to save the day, and I don't think that we are going to see corporations turn around and all, you know, start wearing Jesus sandals, singing Kumbaya. That's my 5 cents here, guys.
Unless, of course, it makes them money.
Unless, of course, it makes them money.
Bingo. Do you know
that's right, sir.
I had a whole bunch of news, but I'm gonna throw it in the bin. Yep, there it is.
Nice cup, by the way.
Thank you. Who needs news? What I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna go straight into this now. I wasn't able to receive the bio from our upcoming guest, from our guest for today, because my Skype restarted and I couldn't click yes. But I think our guest today can introduce himself and what he does. I can say though that we have AUFORN State Director, and what does AUFORN stand for? It's Australian UFO Research Network. We have the State Director from Victoria on as a guest today. This is very special. It's certainly dear to me because of my experiences. But look, I think we'll get more from George Simpson. George, are you with us?
Yeah, I am. How you going, Dave?
Great. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. You couldn't read the bio. You
No,
want me
I
to
couldn't.
give a quick... Okay, yeah, I thought there was a problem when I tried to flick it over to you because I was getting a message that was taking a long time. Okay. Look,
So George, just tell us who you are, who you
Yep.
work for, and have you always been doing this?
okay, well, yeah, I've been interested in this subject for many years, the UFO subject. I read my first book on the UFO subject when I was in primary school, or also known as grade school in some countries. Back in the 1960s it was. The book I read was called Flying Saucers, Where Do They Come From? Authored by Richard Tambling, an Australian author. Then years later I joined the Victorian UFO Research Society in 1987, which was soon after a very major UFO case hit our airwaves. Then after about 5 years in there, I actually joined their committee as a photographic consultant. I've got a background in photographics, in cameras, photographic equipment, electronics, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted me to be like a consultant on photos. They'd get photos sent in. They'd want to know how were these images formed and things like that, so I could kind of help them analyse.
As an image
photos.
specialist.
Yeah, as images that were being sent into them.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for about 8 years. Then in the year 2000, I left that organisation to run the Victorian branch of the Australian UFO Research Network. We kind of pronounce that as AUFORN.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard one to pronounce. It's a strange name. I wouldn't have come up with that name myself, but it just stands for the Australian UFO Research Network, and I run the Victorian branch of it. I'm mainly interested in the Victorian cases, the best Victorian cases that have happened over the years. The main ones being the Westall School case of 1966.
Yes, Westall. We're familiar with that one.
Yeah, and the mysterious disappearance, of course, of Frederick Valentich in 1978, which I remember very, very clearly from the time it happened. And I've had a few personal UFO sightings of my own as well over the years. You know, every 5 or 10 years you see something you can't explain,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't be sure what it was. So it's been an ongoing thing. We have 4 meetings a year that I run here in Victoria, just 4 times a year, and we have like a core group of people who come along to the meetings, but I don't do anything at all to promote it. We have a pretty small venue, and the regulars just keep coming, and that's fine with me. Very low key.
Well, it sounds
That allows me to do research and stuff.
Mm-hmm. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds good. So, what did you do? What led you? What pulled you into it?
Oh well, okay. Look, I've got no choice but to be involved in this stuff. Look, my grandmother had a UFO sighting in the 1960s, and she reported it to us. And I've got a tape recording of her telling that story. But she didn't call it a UFO. She just reported that she saw a Zeppelin, you know, an airship over her backyard in the mid-1960s.
Wow.
And she went into great detail about how it was hovering over her backyard, and she said that it must have been cleaning their engines or something with oil, because some hot fluid came out of it and landed on her cheek,
Mm-hmm.
and burned off a mole that she used to have on her face. And
Wow.
I've got photos of her as a young lady, and she had this mole under her left eye, And when she was telling me the story, when I was a kid, a teenager in the 70s with my reel-to-reel tape recorder, there's no mole there. So there was kind of evidence that she was telling the truth from that point of view. But I've got that recording. She didn't call it a UFO, though. She said it was a Zeppelin. We know there were no airships flying around her area at that time. It wasn't until 20 years later that Alan Bond had his airship flying around. So, and she was long gone by the time he came along. So she saw an airship when there weren't any in her area.
Do you know, I remember the Bond ship. It used to fly over our house.
Yeah.
My grandmother too had a very similar story. A case that happened to her, and they didn't want to talk. It wasn't the era of talking about it.
Right. Well, my grandmother was an English lady, a Pommy, and you could hardly stop her talking. She was always talking about something. So I got out the tape recorder and let her go and just recorded everything. Now, the other reason I don't have a choice about being involved in this subject, I just mentioned before the Westall case. One of the witnesses that's in the documentary about that story, one of the witnesses, his name's Paul Smith. He's married to my cousin.
Wow.
So he actually saw the thing that happened at Westall with his own eyes. And like that was back in 1966. I've known him since probably the mid-70s when he started going out with my cousin. And it's never been mentioned at any of our family meetings or family gatherings, which have never been that we don't have that many get-togethers, but he never mentioned that he was a witness, and he didn't know that I was involved in UFO research. So I didn't find out until the producer sent me a copy of the DVD, and I sat down and watched it, and bang, up on the screen comes my cousin's husband.
No way.
And I was so surprised. I didn't know. So there's another link. And the other reason why I've been involved in this for so long is because I was 20 years old when Frederick Valentich flew off and disappeared. And I was actually at home. I went out to the letterbox. I was waiting for my girlfriend to come over that evening. I saw a blue and white Cessna flying that had just left Moorabbin Airport and was heading towards Cape Otway. And I saw it fly over. And then the next day they said the plane had gone missing. So I was one of the last people to see Fred's plane in the air.
Wow.
But I have an even closer connection to that, which we didn't find out until years later. 2 years before Fred disappeared, the plane was, anybody could hire the plane and fly it. And a friend of mine was learning to fly at the time, and he hired the plane, and my sister and two other people, the four of them went down to Tasmania in DSJ, which later disappeared. Now, my sister borrowed my camera for that trip and took photographs on that trip in the plane that later disappeared. So my camera went on that plane too. So I've got a kind of a connection to it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, completely. I'm looking. There's a photo right now. We'll get you to talk about the Valentich case a bit more in a minute. And
Okay.
I'm looking at a photo right now, and it's got a tractor and a UFO with a plane stuck to it, and I remember seeing the news. I remember the search that went on for the Valentich case, and this was a huge event in this country.
Yeah.
The only previous, I think, was it the previous one where was the New Zealand film crew on a Australia-New Zealand flight filmed an object that was in a single frame, did a multiple loop.
Yeah, that was the reporter Quentin Fogarty from Channel O in those days.
Yeah, so there wasn't much. Westall was big, but the Valentich case really had something about it because surely we can find the plane.
But Westall was completely covered up.
Yes.
There was one little tiny column in the newspaper, in the Age newspaper the next day after Westall, which said that we think a weather balloon was let off and went over the direction of the school, and that might explain for that sighting.
Always a weather balloon.
Yeah, and that was in the Age newspaper the next day. So nobody would have even read it, most likely. It was on page 6, and it was a tiny little column, no photos, nothing. and you had 200 witnesses plus that saw the Westall thing. With regard to the Valentich thing, that was very, very big, and the reason the Valentich case was so big was because he reported that he was seeing something that he could not identify, and then he and his aircraft disappeared and were never found. That's why that was big. He said he couldn't identify it. In fact, at one point he was asked, "Can you confirm that you cannot identify?" And he said affirmative.
Yeah.
He knew aircraft. He studied aircraft. He started flying. He'd only just got his license within a year or so of when he disappeared. He could identify just about any aircraft, but this thing that was flying around him made no sense to him, and he tried to describe it, and then he disappeared. So there's a documentary about that that on Science Channel, the series called The Unexplained Files. It's episode 1. It came out last year. It's been on cable TV in the States. It's been shown in England. It's been shown in Australia on Foxtel. They asked me to be involved in the production of that program. We spent 3 days travelling around filming, interviewing witnesses and people that were involved. And I think we put together a fairly good little documentary on it. I guess hopefully a lot of the listeners to this program would have already seen that documentary about this pilot who went missing. So it's the first episode of the first season of The Unexplained Files on Science Channel.
Now, I have to say, I have seen it.
Yep.
I've watched it a number of times, and I only live up in the 600s, which is all of the science and education channels. And I'm a big fan of when you know that a media outlet is letting this stuff out. I'm a big fan of it. And one of the things that struck me was, and I've just downloaded a bunch of images, and I'm going to I'll stay at the paper headline from the Australian. It says, "It's a long shape coming for me right now, hovering on top of me."
Yep.
And that comes from the aircraft to ground control.
To the air traffic advisor. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And the whole lot. It's not like it was only hearsay. This is recorded. There's recordings of it. And what made that, outside of him describing it being a light? There's it's above me, it's below me, it's on top of me, and then he says, I think the words, does he say it's not an aircraft?
He says that very clearly. He says that more than once too. Early on, he says it's not an aircraft. And then he doesn't say any more.
Yeah.
Because he's looking around trying to get a look at it. And just after that, he says, "Oh, look, it's completely vanished."
Wow.
And at another point, he says, "Oh, it's just flown over me at least 1,000 feet above." At another point, he says, "Oh, now it's now approaching me from the southwest or northwest," and he's not sure because he's been circling so he can see it. See, what he did was he was flying down to King Island, and when they get down to Cape Otway, they turn left, and then they're heading due south, and he's heading due south down to King Island, which should take about another perhaps 20-25 minutes to get there. And after he's left Cape Otway and he's been travelling over the sea about 6 minutes. At that point, he calls in and says, "This is DSJ. Do you have any?" He says, "Melbourne DSJ. Yeah, is there any known traffic below 5,000 feet?" And they get back to him and say, "No, there's no traffic in your area." And then he just starts to describe what he's seeing, that he has what looks like a large aircraft in his area. And then he asks them, "Are you sure you don't have any military aircraft in the area or any Air Force airplanes in the area?" And they say, "No, there's no known aircraft in your area."
He's looking for confirmation because he's seeing something out his window.
Yeah, and then they're asking him, what are you seeing? And he says, "Well, it looks like it's got 4 bright landing lights. It's sort of got a green light, and it's all shiny on the outside."
Wow.
And they say, you know, when they first ask him, can you describe it? He says, well, look, it's it's a very large object. It's going so, I can't really describe it because it has such speed. It's going so quickly that he can't even get a good look at it to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
So, also, as he's talking, there's a kind of continuous crackly static sound coming over the radio as well, like the radio signal is being interfered with by this object. You can hear that very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also very mysterious. I've often wondered what happened because the plane disappeared. They searched the sea for a week or so. They used very sophisticated avionics equipment in an Orion Air Force aircraft. They didn't pick up anything from the sea, not even an oil slick from an aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you crash a Cessna into the water, something's going to break off, something's going to float, and something's going to be found, especially if people are searching for it, and nothing was ever found. And I've often wondered how could it disappear. Now, if you just sort of speculate that perhaps there was a mid-air collision and the aircraft was somehow trapped with this somehow on this strange object,
mm-hmm.
You've got a problem because you've got this prop spinning at full cruise rev altitude,
yes.
Full rev range, 24. What's he say? 23. He says I've got it set at 23, 24. At one point, he says the engine is coughing. He says, but I've got the throttle set at 23, 24 RPM, and the engine's coughing. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That there's some kind of interference happening there to his aircraft engine, and of course, what that does, that creates an alert phase for the air traffic guy, because if you've got engine problems, then you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So that immediately puts them into an alert phase. And of course, the other thing is, what can you do? You're talking to a guy who's flying a plane. On another thing they got wrong in the documentary, one thing they got wrong, he had a headset on the documentary. You know, he didn't. It was a handheld mic. So he's flying the plane with one hand, mm-hmm. holding the mic with the other hand, and pressing the button to communicate.
Yes. And
flying the plane at the same time.
So it's a momentary switch. When you push it, that's when you're talking.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of occasions where he holds the microphone open, and you can hear the transmission. You know it's coming from his plane because you can hear that static again.
Mm-hmm.
Every time he communicates, there's all this static. All the other planes, there was other planes up that day, at that time, that were all communicating, and they're as clear as a bell. But every time you hear Fred talk, there's this noise in the background coming through. A staticky sound all the time.
Let me just clarify something here, okay? So if you've got, for a close encounter of the first kind, it's seeing something within 160 meters of you. 500 feet. So yes, tick, he's seeing something within that distance from himself.
Yep.
The next tick is if you've seen or felt animals or vehicles or devices reacting to the presence or effects on the ground or vegetation. Tick, we've got radio interference from this object, which is not swamp gas, and it's not migrating geese. We have a pilot in the air calling for a confirmation of there being other traffic or military traffic, and all denied. Then as he starts to describe it, it certainly doesn't describe anything in the air that I'm aware that we have, and it's also what could you say about its flight characteristics?
Well, we've only got a few clues from what Fred said. The main being that the thing could fly at extremely high speed, so much so that he asked 2 or 3 times, "Are you sure you don't have any military aircraft in this area?" Mm-hmm. I mean, a fighter jet is about the only thing that would come anywhere near the speed of this thing. But this thing was going many times faster than anything he'd seen. Mm-hmm. And it was very large. He said it was very large and extremely fast. At one point he says that he was orbiting, and this thing was just orbiting on top of him. And he actually said it seems to be playing some sort of a game.
Intelligent control.
He says it appears to be chasing me. And then he says, I'm orbiting and the thing is orbiting just on top of me also.
Yeah. Now, could you describe what orbiting means to those who don't know flight talk?
Well, if you're flying a plane, you're just traveling normally in a straight line between two locations. He's begun circling because he's begun to turn around in a circle so that he can find this object, because 1 minute it's in front of him, the next minute it's disappeared, then it's 1,000 feet above, then it's 500 feet below him.
Yeah.
So he's no longer heading for King Island at this point. He's over the sea, but he started going around in a circle so that he can attempt to see where it's gone. And then he finds it's just above him the whole time. And he's going around in a circle, and it's circling above him too. So, and he actually says it appears to be playing some sort of a cat and mouse game with him. You know, and then he's asked, well, he says, they say, what are your intentions? He says, my intention is to go to King Island. And so he was still flying the plane, and he was totally conscious. He knew which way was up and which way was down. He did not suffer from spatial disorientation,
which can happen at night time.
Well, actually, that's another furphy about this case. It would have been a nighttime return trip, but it wasn't yet dark
so
when he was recording
afternoon to dusk, yeah, because it was what time of year was it?
It was October, late October, and like the sun had gone down, but only just gone down 10 minutes or so before he radioed in and asked, was there any military any aircraft in his area? So the sun wouldn't have been around much longer. He would have had just enough time to land in King Island with just enough light to see what he was doing, but his return flight would have been his first night flight over water.
Oh, I see.
But it certainly was not night time.
Do you know, I've got a whole bunch of some captures from the net, and one of those was discussing a noise. It said plane vanishes after loud metallic noise. Okay, well that was at the end when he was talking to the air traffic advisor. Oh, by the way, he was flying in uncontrolled airspace, so he was not. Okay, that means he was outside of the area where all of the airlines fly and all the big aircraft and everything. He was in an uncontrolled airspace. So they have air traffic advisors for those areas. It's a completely different ballgame to air traffic control. So air traffic control are the guys who control the big airlines to come in and go and keep all the little aircraft away from the airports and from all the large, they're like highways in the air where all the planes fly. If you look on Flight Radar 24 anywhere in the world, you'll see most of the big aircraft are following each other in lines. It's almost like they're travelling down roads. They always follow each other on the same lines. Yes.
And that's controlled airspace, and you've got to stay within controlled airspace. But Fred was outside of the controlled airspace, so he was talking to an air traffic advisor, okay, who told me personally that, you know, he was helpless. There was nothing he could do because he's got an aircraft in trouble at the end of the microphone, and you're only talking to somebody on a microphone. Just your hands are tied. There's nothing you can do. All you can do is talk to the guy and listen to what he's telling you. And one of the last things he said was, "Well, I'm still going to go to King Island." And just a few seconds after he said he was going to King Island, he said, "Oh, that strange object is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering and it's not an aircraft."
Yes, that's right.
Now, just a couple of seconds after that, he tries to communicate again. He says, "Melbourne DSJ," and then immediately there's this strange metallic noise that you just mentioned, that strange clicking metallic noise. Now, what happened was that noise, I believe, is created by somehow the aeroplane and this object this undescribed object come together in the air. They've collided mid-air, and that engine is still going at 23, 24 RPM, and that prop is going around, and it's hitting the side of that object, and that's what that strange clicking metallic sound is. The actual genuine sound is on the History Channel documentary on the Unexplained Files. You'll hear the actual sound.
Yeah, I heard that one.
From that transmission. Well, that is the sound of the prop, I believe, going around, hitting and cracking on the side of that object. Now, when they made the documentary, I didn't know about that.
Oh.
I mean,
Okay.
I had often wondered. You've got an aircraft is a pretty dangerous object when it's got its prop going. You know, the last thing you want to do is walk into anywhere near an aircraft when its prop's going. You know, various people have, and they've come off second best when those things have got a lot of power behind them. Those propellers. So that one of the things in the documentary was that that advisor at the airport, Roger Merridew, is an aviation expert, and he told me in that program that had the plane become inverted in any way, the engine would only run for about 20 seconds and then it would stop, because it's a gravity-fed system on that plane.
Oh.
So these people that say, oh yeah, Fred was inverted, he was flying upside down. So he's upside down flying and got a microphone in one hand and talking calmly and describing what's going on around him for 7 minutes. No, I don't think so. After 20 seconds or so, the engine would have stopped.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm familiar with the same effect, which is on an outside roll. So if you're doing like a forward roll on a plane, the petrol will run out. Even in military, in some military aircraft from World War II. So they have to be very, very careful, and they're conscious about this. And certainly, as you described, there's no way that he could fly upside down for that length of time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But what we discovered something after this program. At the end of the show, they interviewed Dr. Richard Haynes. He'd written a book on the subject, on this particular case, called Melbourne Episode: Case Study of a Missing Pilot. And he's an expert on the case. He's interviewed the family, and he's worked with them for over 20 years, trying to help solve this issue. And he's an ex-NASA scientist. He worked on the Apollo missions, and he wrote this book on the subject. Now, he's interviewed at the end of the show, and he says that metallic sound at the end, which goes for 17 seconds, so it's less than 20 seconds, he says that could be the sound of these two objects when they've come together in the air. That he says that.
Wow.
Now, when he said that, it rung bells with a UFO researcher who, I should not mention his name because he went on and did something that was a little bit unfortunate. It rung a bell with him anyway, and he contacted me and told me that he thought this case might be linked to another case that he knows about.
Yes.
So it's opened up, because he's now seen that documentary, it reminded him of an investigation that he had done some 15 or 16 years previously. And he just contacted me, and it would be about nearly 9 or 10 months ago. He contacted me and said that he thought there might be some connection. Now, what had happened was there'd been a large number of UFO sightings in central New South Wales in the Coonabarabran area. Coonabarabran is where they've got radio telescopes. It's a very high mountainous area, and there's a lot of farming in the area as well. And they get a lot of UFO sightings around that area.
The area also has the largest optical telescope in New South Wales, and I've been there. It's awesome.
Right, yeah, it's huge. Yeah. Well, also friends of mine have driven through there and told me that just driving through there freaked them out. They got really worried when they drove through there. The whole place just,
it feels different.
They thought it was eerie. They didn't like it. Anyway, there's a lot of UFO sightings around that area. So anyway, this researcher went up there to investigate there was a whole number of UFO sightings from that area in the early 1990s. And he went up there And when there was a lot of cases that they investigated, but just about every witness they spoke to said, "Oh, you must go and talk to Laurie. Go and speak to Laurie." And he said, "Well, who's this Laurie character? Why should I have to speak to Laurie?" And they said, "Well, this guy Laurie runs the local hardware store, and he talks to every customer that comes in, and he always likes to talk about UFO sightings and UFO sightings. He always asks people if they've had a sighting." And so he said, and they said, and he's sort of got a log of all the UFO reports and sightings from Coonabarabran for the last 25 years. Go and talk to him. He'll know all the stories and all the cases. So they included Laurie in their investigation. Now, Laurie had so much information, they were overwhelmed with it. And by the time they listened to 40 or 50 UFO sighting cases, these guys were worn out. Because Laurie had so much information on so many things. But then Laurie said of all the cases he'd ever heard, the most interesting one was from this farmer that had come up from South Australia, who claimed that one Sunday morning he was baling hay. He had lucerne. He was baling lucerne up there in South Australia. He had a tractor with a baling machine on the back of it. And a Sunday morning, he's going along and he's working his crops, and he heard this strange noise, a kind of a squealing sound. He thought a bearing had failed in his baling machine, so he disconnected it from the tractor because it's driven from a drive that runs off the tractor. He uncoupled it, jumped off the tractor, went to the back to have a look, and the machinery had stopped because he'd uncoupled it, but he could still hear this screaming sound.
Huh.
And he thought, "Oh, gee, that's a bit strange." And he's trying to figure out how come this is happening? And then he realized he got the sensation that he was in a shadow of something.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked up, and just above him, not very high up, was a large circular object hovering above him, silently, apart from the screaming noise of this sort of bearing sound. And he said he figured out from the length of his trailer, of the baling machine and his tractor, that this thing must have been about 90 feet in diameter. Now, for the Australian people listening, that's about 30 metres.
Yep.
For the Americans, it's 90 feet. So 30 yards. It's a large diameter thing to be hovering above you. And it was so close that he could get a very clear look at all of the characteristics of this object hovering above him.
Mm-hmm.
And he very quickly decided that he was in danger of this thing dropping down on him, because it was making this screaming sound, squealing sound. It was very large, and it wasn't going very fast. He thought that it was at below stalling speed of an aircraft. He thought this thing's likely to just fall on me. So he ran to the side. He left the tractor and ran away to get to the side of this object to get clearance in case it came down. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's run to the side and he's looked up, and when he's got to the side, he could see it had a dome on top, and he said it seemed to have what he thought was a seal going around the base of the dome. It looked like it had a doorway in the dome, which had he said it was like a church door because it had a curve at the top of the door, like an arched doorway.
Like you'd find in a stone church, yes.
Yeah, and he said there was no windows, no handles, no windows, nothing like that. And then he said the most amazing thing was there was a Cessna aircraft stuck to the outside of this thing. And the researcher at that point said, come on, you're kidding. The whole aircraft? And he said, yes, the whole aircraft was stuck to the outside of this object. Now, he said, the wings were flat up against the outside, and the tail was hanging down just over the edge of it. So the motor was at the top, the wings were backed up against it, and so the wheels would have been sticking out forwards.
Oh, I see. So the top of the plane was stuck to the side of the UFO. I understand that. That makes sense.
And the tail was hanging down, and the engine was at the top. Mm-hmm. And he said there was engine oil running down the outside of the aircraft as well. Had you seen this object from a distance, you would have seen this saucer-shaped object and it would have looked like it had a cross on it.
Mm.
That would have been the plane sitting there. Anyway, this farmer couldn't believe what he was seeing, and he said also there wasn't anything holding it up there. There was no ropes holding it up. There was no chains, no ropes. He couldn't understand why the plane was attached to the outside of this object. You know, a bit like a moth stuck on a bumper bar of a car. You know.
Yeah.
Like it's been. I reckon they've had this collision in the air. You know. Anyway, he said he could see the registration number of the aircraft on the wing, painted on the wing. He could see the rego number.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a nail and he's gone back to his tractor after the thing flew off, and he's grabbed a nail from something and he's scratched the registration number of that aircraft into his tractor with a nail so he won't forget it.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did this happen? When was this sighting?
This happened the very morning after the day that the pilot disappeared flying down to King Island.
Wow.
And this is in Adelaide, so it's about probably
1,000 k's, 1,500.
Oh no, it's only from King Island. It's about 500 or 600 k's, 700 k's. So in miles, what's it, 300 or 400 miles away from where the plane disappeared. Now anyway, that's very inventive of the farmer to get a nail and scratch it into his tractor so he wouldn't forget it. I'd like to find the tractor with the registration number scratched in. But now the thing was, the guy telling the story could not remember what that registration number was. We know what it was. It was VHDSJ, Delta Sierra Juliet. That was the number of the plane. Now, the fellow who was telling the story to the researcher, and we have the tape recording of him saying this story, he could not remember what that registration number was at the time, but when the farmer told him the story, the farmer couldn't remember what it was either. He said, next time I come into town, I'll bring it with me on a piece of paper and I'll tell it to you. So he did that, and Laurie wrote it down in his book in the shop. Now, after Laurie found out what that registration number was, he contacted a friend of his who was a pilot, a commercial pilot. You can do this online now, though. There's an online aircraft register, so you can find out if you see any aircraft registration, you can find out what plane it is, who registered it, who owns it.
Yeah, cool.
All those details are available
like a
online.
license plate.
Yeah, it never used to be, but it's all online nowadays.
Okay.
But what Laurie did was he got this friend of his who was a commercial pilot to look it up, and they found that the number had been reissued to another aircraft. Some guy was restoring an antique aircraft. It's so old that the body of it and the wings and everything are made out of that cloth, and they put dope on it to make it go tight. You know,
Yes.
It's like a model aircraft, but it's actually a real one you can fly in.
Like a tiger moth.
Yeah, it's like that. And it's an old-fashioned aircraft, an antique aircraft. It's called an Oster. It's AUSTER. And there's only one registered Oster in Australia, and its registration number is VHDSJ. It's the same one as the. So this is what the farmer scratched in his tractor was that number. He said it's now registered on an Oster, and that is still the only aircraft. You know, there's only one Oster on that listing.
I think it's since the plane had gone missing that they reissued the numbering.
They reissued it 10 years after the plane went missing. They waited for 10 years.
Okay.
So it wasn't until 1988 that this fellow who registered his aircraft got that registration number. Now, I've spoken to the guy who fixed up his aircraft and restored it and got it re-registered. And he's known as Gypsy Mick. He used to work in sideshows in country circuses. He's a sideshow man called Gypsy Mick. And I spoke to him a few months ago on the phone, and he was telling me about how he restored the aircraft's engine, and his wife kept piping up in the background telling us that she did all the sewing because she had to sew all the fabric up to rebuild the plane. She did the wings and the body.
Yeah,
so that's a true story. And so this farmer had the right registration number. It was the day after the pilot had disappeared. And now, anyway, that's not the end of the story. It's nearly the end of the story. But he didn't tell anybody about what he'd seen that morning, and he went into town that afternoon, and one of his neighbours said, "Oh, I see you're doing some more crop spreading." And he said, "No." I said, "Well, why have you got a Cessna up in your top paddock?" And he said, "There's no Cessna in my top paddock." I said, "Yes, there is, mate. I was down there this morning, and I saw your Cessna down there in your runway at the end of your property. I saw it down there." And he said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I'll go and check that out when I go home." So he went back home. He had to go through several gateways to get up to his top paddock.
Mm-hmm.
Had a landing strip up there so that the people would come in and do their crop dusting for them. And he got up to the top paddock, and he said there was no aircraft there when he got there, but there were tyre marks in the grass. And he followed the tyre marks to where they stopped, and there was a pool of oil on the ground.
Wow.
Something. So apparently the plane had been there and gone. Now that opens up a whole range of new, impossible to answer questions.
That's amazing.
I would really like to talk to this farmer. I don't even know if the farmer is still alive. The guy telling the story, the businessman who was told the story by the farmer,
Mm-hmm.
he himself passed away 7 or 8 years ago, but we've got the tape recording of him telling the story.
Oh, okay.
So it's very, very hard to get anywhere with this investigation because we don't have the farmer's name.
Do you know what? I'm going to.
That's amazing. Actually,
I'm putting the call out to everyone right now. Use your feelers, use your network. See if we can get some more detail on maybe you bought a tractor and there was something etched in the side that didn't make sense. If you can find a tractor that has VHGJS on the side, DSJ. I'm sorry, DSJ. If you or anything. Let us know what it is. We'd like to get in touch with you.
In South Australia.
Yep. Well, you don't know where it could be now.
Yeah, look, that's true. Just on that though, I mean, while I was listening to the story, which is fascinating, I'm just reminded of how tenuous some of this information is. I mean, I'm sure people have experiences like this quite often, but they're not documented, they're not recorded, they're lost. So we're lucky in this instance that there is some kind of record, right? We have a record, we have voice recordings, and we have all kinds of different different things here, which is fascinating, by the way. And a lot of, a lot of questions which are raised by this particular story. And after the break, in fact, we're coming up to it fairly rapidly. It's been flying by. I would very much like to ask you, George, a number of questions around where we find clusters of sightings. In Australia specifically, of course. Your own personal theories as to what might be related to it, how it relates to ancient Aboriginal sites, if it does in fact at all, and also what you think might be behind this, maybe not a singular phenomenon, but a number of phenomena. And we also would like to talk to you about the Malaysian flight, or airline flight that has gone missing. Sorry, just to set the scene for the next hour, guys, so don't go away. We are approaching the break point. But George, look, thank you very much. So far, I have been very quiet, but I've been fascinated by the information you've been sharing with us. It's really awesome, especially because Australia has this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what's really weird about this? I put a slide deck up together, and I've actually got a photo of a farmer with the trailer and the UFO, the Cessna stuck to the side. I've got that up, and we ran that while you were describing it. There's so much to this case that is mind-boggling.
Are we in the break? Are we in the break now?
Not yet. We will be
not
at the top of the hour. And so, because it's mind-boggling, there was no plane found. There was no. Just think about this, everybody. How this reflects to anything that's current. There's no aircraft wreckage, and I tell you, like, you're right, George. If a Cessna hits the water, it's like hitting a brick wall. These planes aren't made to smash into things. They fall apart quite readily. A lot of components in the planes that float on their own independently, even though they're made of metal, they're made very light, and the seat cushions and everything, linings. Oil floats too, right? So you're always going to get oil and fuel, and the fuel is in where?
In the wings?
In the wings. So the wings come off, the fuel bladders leak, everything. So you're going to see something. Now, we had one of Australia's biggest searches ever looking for that plane, and we didn't find it. So, you know, he was going on a short flight. It wasn't like he was flying around the world solo. Yeah,
no.
That lady, Amelia Earhart, went missing. We've got him radioing in exactly what it was happening to him, and it was documented. And this is what I find extraordinary, is despite all of that, and they ran newspaper articles saying UFO, blah, 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 it's almost ignored. And that's the hard part. Why is the word UFO, you know, a crazy basket? It should be. It was engineered that way in the 1940s after Roswell. That's what the Majestic 12 decided to do, ridicule the whole thing while they're trying to work out what's going on. Exactly, and the Brookings report said that people weren't ready for it.
Yeah, well, that's wrong.
Well, that's right. We're all ready for it. It's been around for thousands of years.
That's right. Just quickly, David, one thing about that artist's sketch of the photo of the farmer with the tractor
I'll put it
with
back
the UFO.
Yes. Yep.
And the UFO with that plane, it looks like it's landed on top in that sketch. It's been done the wrong way. The guy who did that just made a mistake in the way he put the aircraft against that object. It should be hanging off the side of it
and upside down.
Up, with the wheels sticking out. The wings up against the side of it.
Thanks for clarifying that, because it's important. You know, I think that they have a field around them, which if if they let you in, you'll never escape from, possibly. Maybe the field attracts metal. Maybe, I've heard Paul Hellyer say that it fatigues metal quite readily, because of the way the nature of their propulsion system.
Well, the engine block in the aircraft would be a ferrous metal, although the body of the aircraft was aluminium.
Aluminium, yeah.
But are we talking magnetic attraction, or are we talking a gravitational field attraction?
Well, I reckon it would have to be gravitational.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Agreed.
I'd agree. Yeah. So
it begs so much investigation. And just right before we got 2 minutes before the break, how long have you been looking at this one? Because I saw you on the unexplained files. Yeah. Yep. On the documentary, and that's what led me to try to get in contact with you. But you found me.
Yep.
What led you down that path, and how long have you been looking at this?
Well, I was one of the last people to see the plane in the air, so I've been interested in this case since the day it happened, and I just happened coincidentally to be the same age as the missing pilot. So it's just very strange. I've always found UFOs an interesting subject. And this case is particularly intriguing because you've got a pilot reporting seeing something he can't identify, and then he disappeared. So it's one of the major cases, definitely. And it's still unexplained. And it's also a family tragedy, this. You've got a missing pilot, who's the eldest son. They still haven't been able to have a funeral because they've had no closure, because there's no body.
Of course.
There's no body. They can't have a funeral.
Yeah.
And this year, since that Malaysian plane disappeared, every day, for month after month, there was something about this and searching for this missing aircraft, and that brought it back to them all the time. Their missing aircraft is still missing. Their son is still missing.
Yeah.
So it's been a very hard year for the family.
There's the music, guys. We'll catch you on the other side of this short break. Hold tight.
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be very
Don't
interesting.
go away, and if you can, use the opportunity to push the donate button. Thank you.
Radio.
Listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement over years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the matrix to empower your human experience.
Yeah. I gave this about half an hour ago.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. If you plan to call in and speak with one of our hosts, please turn down your radio and separate yourself from any background noise and wait for the area code to be called on before you speak. And don't forget, Revolution Radio freedomslips.com is listener supported. So stop by the homepage, freedomslips.com, visit the site support area to help support the host you're listening to's airtime. Thank you. Revolution Radio freedomslips.com, where the truth never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. That's right, the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. Since it is listener-funded, guys, we would like you very much to donate if you like what you hear, and your help is immensely appreciated. Hawk and the team are doing a fantastic job just keeping the station running. Now, we'd also like to say hello to all our new listeners. I'm sure there are some of you, so welcome aboard, and welcome to the chat room. If it's your first time, please say what you like, ask questions. In fact, maybe that hasn't been something we have done for a while, but please put your questions in the chat. We will ask George. We are halfway through show number 220 and 122, talking to George Simpson, in fact, and he is with us from AUFORN, the Australian UFO Research Network, and he's been telling us fascinating stories, and I have to say, it really is amazing stuff. Now, also, just a quick station announcement, guys. We are holding the auction. The station auction is on this weekend. There are 50 items up for auction, and you just have to go to www.ourfreedomnetwork.com, www.ourfreedomnetwork.com, and you can bid on those auction items at any time. Shipping is included. In the US.
Yes.
Outside the US, not so much. Sorry, guys. So again, thank you very much for the first hour. It has been fantastic. I would like to ask a general. No, well, it's not a general question. I would very much like to. I mean, your opinion, George, because you obviously are very much neck deep into the research and you have the information. Are there clusters in Australia where we have sightings? Are there specific sites that are more UFO visited, and I'm not saying UFO is this, that, or the other, than others? Are there ancient Aboriginal sites maybe connected to UFO sightings as well?
Oh, okay, well, that's a very large question to give you a very quick answer.
I know.
There
Take
are.
your time.
I think what you mean is UFO hotspots.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Where there's a lot of UFO activity. Well, here in Victoria, where I live, in the southern part of Australia, in Victoria, the Dandenong Mountains area, there's been a lot of sightings in that area over many, many years. It's sort of a mountainous area where there's a lot of sightings get reported anywhere around the Dandenong Mountains. Also around the Grampians, which is a large national park and mountain range, sort of on the way to Adelaide from Melbourne.
Place.
Yeah, the Grampians. It's a big national park area. That's a pretty much a UFO hotspot. People go there just to see these strange lights flying around, and we don't know what they are. I don't know if they're alien spaceships, but there's a lot of unusual things that fly around that are not understood. That's probably the best way to put that one. Just about anywhere in Australia, though, if you look at the history, it's gone back a long way. There's the Aboriginal culture have a completely different attitude to what we do with regard to the concept of other civilizations visiting us from the stars. Mm-hmm. To them, that's just a normal, natural thing. They live out in the environment. They don't live under. They don't like to sleep with a house roof over them. This is the people that live out in the wilds, out in the country. The Aboriginals just like to. They're out in the environment all the time, and they see these things going on all the time. And they've got a long history of having some kind of occasional engagement with the people who come down. This is the way that they put it. The stars come down and land on the ground, and these people get out and teach them all about the universe, and then go to the star, and the star goes back up into the sky. That's how they describe it, and that's been going on for thousands of years, and they think we're crazy if we don't believe it.
I think they're right.
They experience it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
George, recently Mekki and I went up to Mount Yengo, where the space carving is, the carving of the spaceman, and that was an amazing thing to be connected to one of the stories. Ourselves being there, standing there, looking at what and understanding the background to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some very good art, isn't it? It's an amazing picture, and it really looks like aliens, doesn't it? It's amazing.
It really does.
Yeah.
And how we can ignore this is art. It's beyond me.
It's like they're trying to record something that's happened, and they want us to see it, and we just say, "Oh, that's a nice bit of art," and that's all we have. Yeah, we don't see the deeper meaning behind it.
Yeah,
like we should.
Correct. We were fortunate enough. We had some representatives from Forgotten Origins with us that explained to us what these carvings meant, and the history with it, and and how they also asked the elders around about these things. And now the thing is this, though, and I'm putting this out here. What do you think might be behind the phenomenon? Now, a UFO just simply is an unidentified flying object, right? That's all it is, guys. So what in your research again, and Dave has got an opinion, I have an opinion. What would be behind it? Now, look, the truth is this: some are probably misidentified, right? Others are phenomena which we can't explain today. For, you know, some other stuff. Others may very well be related to extraterrestrial activity, quite possibly, right? And others, yet again, maybe dimensional or otherwise travelers. The thing is this: the only one out of millions of sightings have to be a true sighting for this phenomenon to be real, right? So I believe it's a real phenomenon. I think there are a lot more sightings than just the one that are real. But what do you think is fundamentally behind the majority of the sightings? Do you believe it is visitations from other solar systems, from planets within the solar system, or could these be interdimensional travelers, time travelers? I mean, I don't know. Are these people that are already here? We just hidden away in underground bases. I'm just putting the question out there.
Well, the thing is, it depends what you mean by interdimensional and that sort of stuff. To me, that starts to sound a bit like science fiction. Multi-dimensions and intradimensional. I mean, there might be something in that, but look at it this way. The stars are so far away that they may as well be in a different dimension because they're in a different time and space and different time and place completely. They're so far away. But if we had some way of traveling there, which was not a linear mode, which is the way we think, if we had some other way of doing it, then we may not see it as being so distant. But the interdimensional thing seems a little bit science fiction-y to me. But I think, look, the universe is just such a weird and wonderful place, and it's so huge, so vast. I don't see anything unusual about the fact that there could be millions of different civilizations that could travel here and possibly have done already. I can't see why we're supposed to react so negatively to that. I think that it doesn't surprise me at all that there would be people much more advanced than we are, and who may have solved some of the physics, some of the mysteries of the physics of how could you do that sort of long distance travel. Somebody who's millions of years ahead of us in technology. I mean, look, we only invented the camera 100 years ago. You know what I mean?
No, look, you're right. Yeah.
Our technology has taken off in the last 120 years, but before that, there wasn't a heck of a lot. I just think that the technology, there's other reasons why their technology could be more advanced than ours too, if we're assuming that they exist and that they have greater technology. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of evidence in support of that. You've heard of Bob Lazar and his story. Just recently, they did a 25-year return to him and to his story, and they sort of did an update. And it's there on YouTube. If you just type in Bob Lazar 25-year update or something like that, and also have a look for Bob Lazar 25 years extended version. Have a look at that. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's only a little bit that wasn't put in the clip on the air in America, but it's a bit more of the interview with Bob Lazar, where he talks about how they have this gravity wave machine, and they've turned it on, and they put a candle sort of in the portal of this piece of piping, this equipment which has this gravity wave. And he said there's a candle there. Now, the flame of the candle froze, but it's still illuminated. It was still emitting light, but it wasn't moving anymore when the gravity field went through.
Wow.
Which showed it was actually stopping time. Gravity and time are related.
They are related,
and
that's right.
That's something that we have never been able to experiment with because we haven't had the technology. He was the first person. His story makes sense to me. He said that they travel around in the universe in the blink of an eye because they've got control of gravity, which we don't have. That's how they can do it and we can't. It simply comes down to we don't even know what gravity is really. We still call it a particle. He's saying that's not a particle; it's a wave. And he told us about this thing, this metal. It's an atomic radioactive metal with an element, an atomic number of 115.
That's right.
And all the scientists said, no, that doesn't exist. You're making it up. It's a whole lot of rubbish. It's now on the periodic table. They've now discovered that what he said, at least part of what he said, was correct. there isn't a metal with an atomic weight of 115, and it is relatively stable. It doesn't just decay like other things either side of it do. They just collapse because they're unbalanced. This is balanced and it stays there. And if you've got this stuff, you can access a gravitational wave from it. If you can access the wave, you can then amplify it. And if you can amplify the gravitational wave, and then you can change its frequency, you can change, and you can change its polarity, you can change its phasing. And if you put it out of phase with the gravity around you, you get repulsion.
Absolutely. You've mentioned all the things that we've spoken about so far. So our listeners are across something being out of phase, gravity amplification, and being able to steer it by modulating the direction. And we know that Bob Lazar has spoken about the three emitters on the bottom of a craft.
Yeah.
And that's, we know that a tripod is the most stable thing. You mentioned also the material is sort of like gold. You bury gold, it doesn't oxidize. It's a noble metal.
Yeah. And it doesn't exist in our part of the solar system because we're not in the close proximity of as far as we know, of a supernova or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about this for many years because I first heard about Bob Lazar and all this about 20 years ago. Only a few years after he first came out with it. I hadn't heard of it straight away. But to me, it would make sense. They say that the core of the Earth is iron. It's a big iron core of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon probably inside the iron there's probably some of this element 114. They're calling it unum pentium now. Because that's probably the source of all gravity. You've got a bit of a gravitational field, and it's probably surrounded by an iron core, but you've probably got the unum pendium in the middle, and it's probably also at the central point of any other celestial body. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, it makes total sense, probably even in the sun. Completely. One of the things... we're finding this technology come forward, and you mentioned something really interesting in the beginning of that answer, which was that the stars are so impossibly far away, and yes, we don't have a technology that can get there. Most of the argument for there being, the chemical rockets will never get us anywhere close to them, and we'd go through several generations by the time we got to the closest star, let alone any other one. If there's such life everywhere, which I believe in, I've got a personal stake in it, and I think there's life everywhere, and it's teeming with life. Like when Lewis and Clark went across America, they said they described being able to just put their hand in the river and pull up a fish. It was teeming with life. That's what I think that the galaxy is like, with the possibility of us not even being halfway up the technological spectrum. I think we're only maybe a 10th in or something. We don't know. I can guess we're not at the top. And of course, and gravity being by being able to control gravity, that means you can bend space-time, and that's been theorized by human physicists for some time as being what you could effectively go from one point to another instantaneously, or with the effect of it being instantaneously from your point of view, but being an observer, you would see the thing travel the distance. So when you said that the candle didn't move but still made light being emitted, that's the kind of thing that describes that seems to be the mechanics around something that has an impossible flight characteristic. It's able to stop and then dart in a different direction. They're affecting time dilation or gravity or space.
You've got to see Bob Lazar talking about it because he saw it with his own eyes, and he's describing how he's got empirical evidence of what's happening right in front of him, and he still can't believe it.
Yeah.
Because it's so gobsmackingly different to anything that we're familiar with. But I'd just like to reiterate something too. That this story with the farmer seeing this UFO and with the plane stuck on it and everything. Nobody knows this. This has not been on any radio show or any TV show ever.
It has now.
You guys are the first to hear about it.
Awesome.
Okay? Yeah.
Now this is coming, guys, everyone. This is coming directly from the Australian UFO Research Network. All right.
Yep.
That's where it's coming from. Not coming from me. Right. And I think this is one of those things that needs to be sought after. So if anyone has any more information, please email me. Just look out for David Shiny Side Out. Do you know, I wanted to ask you a bit more about this. Now, Becky asked about clustering. I know that there's, in Victoria, but I found out recently that there's a bunch of grey nomads. That's what we call retired people with caravans. Grey nomads going up to the Northern Territory to watch the light shows. Yeah. Have you heard about that?
Well, apparently there's a lot going up there in the Northern Territory in an area called Whitland Wells.
Mm-hmm.
The people up there say that it's Australia's UFO capital. I'm not sure about that. I know people that have been up there. I know people have gone up there and seen nothing. But you've heard of Min Min lights and things like that, which are
Min Min lights, yes.
part of the Aboriginal culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know, again, whether that's actually any kind of extraterrestrial activity or not. We don't know, but it's just some sort of strange phenomenon that goes on, just like what goes on at the Grampians. Strange phenomenon that's probably not fully understood. But we don't know if it's extraterrestrial or not. It's just some kind of light that's seen and it moves around and it's got some sort of strange behavioural characteristic. It's definitely not normal.
Yep.
When you see it, you know it's pretty strange. But what is it? We just don't know.
Well, my grandmother had a story where she said there was a white sphere about a foot across that danced around the flowers in her garden. This is without electricity, without town power. Now, nothing. Yeah, she was up in Barrington Tops. That's where she lived at the time. And she said it danced around, and when she spoke to herself in her own head, thinking, "Wow, what's that?" It froze. It froze what it was doing, and then she watched as it went. She had to lean towards the window to watch it go around the side of the house. They went around the side of the house, and she went, "Oh well, that's finished, and I'll just keep washing up or cooking."
Yeah.
And then she turned around. She felt a presence, and it arrived in the kitchen.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, this was back in the 20s, or possibly 30s, 1930s, and she said that she had a mental exchange with it. I found this out in her deathbed, and then it left via the back door, or whichever was the opposite to the way it came in. It didn't collide with any furniture. It didn't do anything that would be classified as how she was told what it was by all the experts at the time. Said, "Oh, it's ball lightning." She said,
ball lightning.
She said it was a clear day. There was no clouds, nothing. Right.
Yeah.
And the way that she described this to me really felt to me like it was sentient. It had something that was alive about it, and it was intelligently controlled or controlled itself, or it was something in a little field of its own.
You know what that sounds like?
What's that?
It sounds like something from the Outer Limits.
Yeah, or the Foo Fighters, the World War II pilots said that they were flying around their aircraft or around about white spheres of light. I've seen videos of them. There's even one that looks, maybe it's faked, which was a crop circle one. But if I've seen that earthquakes or I forget the terminology, but the precursor to an earthquake is the possibility of seeing some kind of light as well. We can't just throw that away. But we don't have earthquake activity so much up in the Northern Territory to throw this one away.
I think ball lightning is such a rare thing; it's hardly ever seen, and it almost exists more in the minds of scientists than it does in reality. I think ball lightning. Look, I've got to say something. Though. You've reminded me of another thing. When I used to be in the Victorian UFO Research Society, which started in the 1950s and finished probably about 10 or 12 years ago, when the founding members all passed on in their 80s and 90s. But the lady who was the president of the society, a lady called Judith McGee, was in her younger days. She was a very good-looking young lady, and she got a job as an airline stewardess. And she was flying back from Perth on a midnight flight from Perth. Now she was told in the training when they were training these air stewardesses. Part of the training, they were warned about something. They were told if you ever happen to notice, and you will notice it, a glowing blue ball about the size of a basketball coming into the plane and flying through the aircraft down the full length of the aircraft and out the back.
Yep.
Don't be alarmed because it doesn't do any harm. We don't know what it is, but don't be alarmed. Just calm the passengers down and make sure everybody's tell them that everything's okay, nobody's been hurt, and the plane's okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to arrive safely, and there's nothing for anyone to worry about. Now, she was told that in her training, and she just dismissed it. And then a few years later, that's exactly what happened to her. They were flying back from Perth on a late night flight, midnight flight, and about halfway to Melbourne from Perth, which is about a 4-hour flight. Yep. She said this thing came in through the front of the plane and came down between all the seats, right down the middle aisle. It was probably a DC-10 or something, the plane, one of those old planes. But she said this object came down. It was like the size of a basketball. Didn't make any sound. It was glowing, and it just passed right down the middle of the plane. And she was sitting at the back. There was another stewardess next to her, and it went between the two of them and went straight through the back wall of the plane between them. And she actually put her hand on the wall to see if there was any heat or if it was cold. It wasn't cold and it wasn't hot. There was no way of telling anything had gone through. But she made a strange remark though. She said that all the passengers watched their heads turned as it went past them. She saw all these heads turning as the thing was coming towards them. And she said all the heads turned like chickens. Oh. That's what she said.
that means that everyone saw it. That's it wasn't just her thing. She didn't have too much cough syrup that morning. She was warned about it. It's a known something to occur, yeah?
Yeah, well, that led to her lifelong interest in the UFO subject because she had that close-up that went right next to her shoulder and through the back wall of the plane. And she ended up becoming the president of the society in the end. So there you go, folks. That's a true story.
I've never heard about the blue one before. When you mentioned it was it emitted light, it was glowing. That's the same description as my grandmother's one. There wasn't a solid surface to it.
Right. Well, this particular story that she was told, don't worry about it. It won't cause any harm. Now we know that ball lightning, if it hits anything, it explodes. Yep. This thing went through and got into the plane, and then went out the plane and didn't explode. Nothing exploded. Yep. So I don't know what it was.
I've seen the simulations where they've created in a lab, ball lightning that is, and it's basically molten metal that's giving off so much heat that it creates a field around it. And it
plasma.
Yeah, that's pretty much, and that's not what this is. These things that are being seen aren't that. And certainly plasma doesn't come through an aircraft and go out the other side. It seems to me as though it's got a field around it. It seems to me like, if you have to Star Trek it up a bit, it seems like it's a little bit out of phase, but you can just sort of see it. I don't know, maybe it's got the ability to pass through objects. That's something else. We've got about half. We're at the bottom of the hour. We've got another 30 minutes to go before the show finishes, and I really wanted to talk to you about what different shapes of objects have people seen? Is there a change to them? Let's just start with that. Yeah. Over time, have they changed?
If you look at the reports from the 1890s and times like that, most of the reported sightings were not of these disc-shaped things. They were more cylindrical, like an aircraft fuselage with no wings. Just like a cigar shape. Yeah. Most of the things reported in those days were like airships, cigar shapes, like Zeppelin type things. Before we had airships, in the 1890s they were reported, and then our airships later appeared after that. Then the first reports of flying saucer disc-shaped things, they were reported around the end of World War II or middle of World War II. When we started playing with nuclear bombs, that's when these things suddenly appeared. These sort of things are still reported these days, but there's also a whole range of other types of things that are now reported, like all different types of shapes of things. They're no longer just flying saucers, and things have been seen changing shape as they go through there too. So anything goes now, as far as what is it you saw. Anything goes.
Do you think that I think Standard Friedman says this, and when we interviewed him recently, and he said, the kids have got the matches and drew their attention.
Yep. It makes sense. I would not want to go against the greatest minds of the greatest scientists that all got together at the end of World War II, and formed, this majestic 12 group. They were some of the greatest thinkers available at the time.
Yep.
They concluded with the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the EGH. To me, that's the only thing that makes sense. So there's a lot of other theories around, but to me, that one it's still valid, and it makes sense to me. It makes more sense than trying to find extraterrestrial life out there, trying to pick up radio waves. Like the SETI group do. I think they're wasting their time. The radio waves are too slow.
Do you know what? For the immense distance that you'd have to travel to be able to communicate, the only way that you could do it is something that I theorized about, which would be using a particle that's paired, so quantum entanglement, and you have one of those which you could vibrate up or down in X, Y, Z, and the pairing of that could be at any other place in the universe, and you could talk into, say, your smartphone, and it had one of the particles, and the base station had the other one, and you could have a conversation across the entire universe, and it would be instantaneous.
Well, there's no reason why that, theoretically, if it works theoretically, there's no reason why it wouldn't work in reality. The thing is that, thinking about what Lazar was saying about you could have two different stars light years apart, and you're at one and you want to travel to the other one, and with you controlling the gravity, you can bring the space near that distant star, haul it towards you, step across, turn it off, space goes back to where it was, you're there. Now, that to me makes more sense than trying to just travel over time in a line.
Yeah, completely.
So that makes sense. A lot of people, it's complete science fiction, but hey, Lazar said that this is what the American government taught him.
Yes.
Was what they were told is how the extraterrestrials do it. That's how they got here. That's what they say.
I have absolutely no argument either on that.
Who are we to argue with these guys?
That's exactly right. So,
they've done it.
Pardon me.
They've pretty done it, yeah.
Yeah. So I exactly the way you described it, which is you hold on to where you are, reach out to where you want to go and pull that towards you, and then let go of where you just were, and you're at the new location. Yeah. And
you're there. It's like swinging across a curtain from one side of a curtain to another. And the other thing is, we do understand, of course, that space is nothingness. It's lack of everything. There's nothing there in space. So all you're doing is controlling something that really it consists of nothing anyway. So if you've got a strong gravitational field controlling a vast amount of nothingness, it doesn't matter how much nothingness you've got, because there isn't much of it.
It's still zero.
That's right.
Yeah,
so to me, that
times
makes more
by zero
sense.
is zero. That's right.
And I was also reading the paper the other day. The latest theory from the astrophysicists is that the universe actually doesn't exist at all. That's their latest theory. So I don't know what sort of weed they've been smoking. But you point the Hubble telescope at an area of the sky where there is nothing, and you find billions of galaxies that have never been seen before. So what about them?
Yeah, even the smallest centimetre at arm's length, there's still millions of galaxies in there. That's why the whole argument is preposterous, that we're the only life. That it must truly be teeming with life. I was going to ask you, in fact, the very day that we got in contact with each other was the day that I heard that MH370 went missing.
Oh, was it really?
It was the actual day.
Oh, okay.
And on that show, after having spoken to you for, I forget, it was like an hour or something, or close, I was gardening, then I heard that MH370 had gone missing. And I thought to myself, you know what, that just doesn't seem to make sense. But here's the universe, you know, in a sort of esoteric way, telling me to pay attention to this thing. It's really big. Yeah. And as we've seen, MH370 has gone through its own Roswell of changed stories, and and information that didn't seem to make sense, and from start to finish, even though I don't know what day, I've lost count now, how many months ago it was now, but it's once again, it's so, to me, I think there's still a possibility it could be very much like the Valentich case. And that it could be, there might be a wormhole, a porthole, or it could be, an alien ship, or it could have been taken into, tractor beamed into something.
I don't know what happened there. But there is this is reality. That plane was involved in an on the ground accident where about a third of one of its wings was actually completely broken off.
Yes.
And they had to rebuild one of the wings, and we don't know. It flew for 2 years after that with no problems. But there's a possibility that there was a sudden catastrophic accident or something. I don't know what happened. There was definitely some strange, very high-speed things flying around in the same area, according to the radar tapes that I've seen, that were not too far from the plane, like within 50 miles of the plane. There was some other object going faster than any other aircraft, like 3 or 4 times or more faster than an aircraft can fly.
Yeah.
What was that? What was it doing there? And that was at the time when the plane disappeared. Looking at the radar tapes, that plane disappeared after its altitude was reported as being 0.
Yes.
Now, if that aircraft, first of all, it was at 33 to 35,000 feet, and within a minute it was at 0. What's going on there? I don't know if you can get a false reading like that just by turning off the transponder, or did the craft actually come down to the water level and therefore report that it was still going at 470 kilometers an hour and 0 altitude? But look, I don't know. If it did reach 0 altitude, as the instruments were showing, if that's true, then as far as I know, out in that part of the South China Sea and the South China Sea, as far as I know, there aren't any landing strips there. And if the plane hit 0 altitude there, it's not coming back up, right? And that's where they should be looking for the thing, not off the coast of Perth. No?
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense to me how they're looking for it. But I don't know if there's anything that weird going on with this missing aircraft. I really don't know. What we do know about the Valentich case is the last thing he said was that he had a strange object that was not an aircraft, and it was right near him. It was right in front of him, and it was there, and then he disappeared. Now that's completely different to no message at all and suddenly disappeared. 2 completely different things. And we can speculate, but I don't know if we can say that there's anything that's... I don't know if there was... with the TW370... Oh, what was it?
MH370.
MH370.
Yep.
I don't know if there's anything... there could be some kind of very strange thing going on. A lot of things don't add up with that case. But I wouldn't be happy to come out and say, I think there was some kind of UFO connection.
That's okay. I'm able to, because I've got a tinfoil hat on. So,
yeah, you can do that. Yeah. Good on you, Dave.
No, thank you.
I can't do that, though.
No, that's fine, and I respect your professional position on it.
With Valentich, definitely, because that's the last thing he said.
Exactly.
My
comparison to the two, though, was that imagine, he had different style of instrumentation in those days. Right now, we use a different kind. if you were trapped within a sphere of, some kind of propulsion or what have you, it may very well register at 0. We don't know. I don't know how it quite works. But, has there been any recent sightings in Victoria of note?
Ooh. We do get sightings happening all over the place all the time, but I haven't heard of anything that really stands out.
Anything with any footage? Is there any footage or anything that no one can release or anything like that? Is there any maybe multiple people seeing the same thing? Like we saw an orange orb up here on the Central Coast.
Yeah. The most interesting thing I've seen as far as a video in recent times was about a year ago now. Some plane flying over Canberra. It's a daylight flight. You can see the wing. You can see you're travelling at normal cruise speed in a normal airliner, and this little white object passes you and overtakes the plane and going in the same direction as the plane, but going a lot faster outside, probably 2 or 3 times the speed of the aircraft. And you've probably seen it. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's that Canberra thing. That's one of the most interesting things I've seen for a long time. It's just a little round white ball going along with very, very high speed. Just like the Concorde video.
I know, the Concorde video. I was going to mention that.
That's amazing. It's the same kind of thing. It's a little round sphere. And that's what Dr. Richard Haynes mentioned in his talk. He gave a talk on UFOs in Melbourne. And a lot of the talk was about the Valentich case. He'd just written that book about it. But he said that by far, most of the things that pilots report are little round spheres. They could be, say, a metre in diameter, but they're like little drones. They fly around and do incredible things. They're the most common reported things by pilots. And pilots are up there in the airspace and they see these things. We had a very interesting theory that came to us just when I was leaving the Viewfalls group. We were getting a lot of reports from people who had seen UFOs hiding underneath airline planes. So the large aircraft that we see, the large Boeing 747s and things like that,
yes,
would be flying along, but there would appear to be a disc underneath it, but it's not part of the aircraft. It's hiding from our radar by flying in close proximity, but below the aircraft, so nobody sees it.
Yeah.
But they can come and go as much as they like it, and nobody notices them. We had a group of people that came to us that wanted help because they were having these experiences. The typical alien abduction experience scenario was going on with about 30 or 40 of these people that all suddenly turned up looking for help one night at one of our public meetings, and they decided to form a group to kind of counsel them and to help them because they were all struggling with it. And we had them all in this one room, and then we had a big map on the wall. And we got everybody to place on the map where they were from, and it was a straight line across the map. And this straight line went from the airport runway at Melbourne straight out to Mount Dandenong, right across Melbourne in a straight line.
Wow.
Now, everybody in that room was somewhere on that line, which meant that these visitors could come in, because the people who live in the areas in the flight corridors don't pay any attention to the sky anymore, because the planes are flying over so regularly, it's just normal. You don't look at it anymore. It's like if you live next to a railway station, you're not going to watch every train that goes past.
That's true.
Right? So these things can come and go, pick up and deliver people and drop them back and not even be noticed because they're doing it in the air traffic corridor. In the air traffic corridor.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So the if you put all the information together, here you've got an alien ship that, or military. We don't know whether it's a MyLab thing, but that cruised in a single direction, and picked and chose who they wanted to as they just travelled across, the Melbourne landscape.
Well, we couldn't believe it. Everybody in that room was somewhere on that line.
Huh. That's extraordinary. I don't think I've seen anything like that before. Normally it's hickledy-pickledy, or there's no rhyme or reason to it, yeah?
Yeah, well, it's a very busy air traffic corridor too.
Mm-hmm.
All of the planes that come in from New Zealand to Melbourne travel along that very line. All the ones that come from, and most of the ones coming down from Sydney, well, no, they come further up north. No, it was all the New Zealand traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a lot of UFO activity that goes on down in New Zealand, but these people all lived somewhere along that line between Mount Dandenong and the airport, and that's the air traffic corridor that all the New Zealand planes fly up and down on every day, all day, every day.
Wow, that's a good piece of data.
Yeah, it was interesting. Of course, we all found that out 12 years ago, or even long, 13, 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Look, nobody's done anything with it or about it. Nothing happens, but that's what we found. There you go.
So who do you think knew about that? Like, and I wonder why it hasn't got more publicity.
It's never been reported. It's never been reported. It's never been written up. It was noticed at the time on the night, and it was remarked upon as, gee, that's interesting, and that was it. We all moved on to other stuff. So nothing ever happened after that. But I've never forgotten it, because I thought it was really interesting. Mm-hmm. That all over Australia you'll get reports from people that have seen something unusual to do with airports, to do with aircraft. And if you wanted to come and go and not be noticed, mm-hmm. it'd be, if you had that kind of aerobatic prowess, you could just park yourself under a big plane and just come in and not even be known.
Wow.
Not be seen.
Yeah, yeah. I would imagine that, that with all the abduction cases and everything, that there might be some kind of ability to cloak or do something. But if you didn't, that'd certainly be a way of being able to achieve it.
Well, we couldn't understand why, but everyone in the room who'd come looking for help, that were having this intense connection with things that they didn't want, they didn't ask for, and they didn't appreciate. Mm-hmm. They were all living in straight under that one air traffic corridor. That's where they all lived.
Is there in Australia? I know in America, and I hear this all the time. Freedom of Information Act, and they do radar requests, and they get them. Is there any such place in Australia, and how does one, make contact anyone about their experience if they happen to have had one?
There are a few researchers I know of that are trying to get the government to come out with actually releasing some of these top secret documents about things that the Air Force guys have to do, the procedures they have to follow if they encounter something unusual. Mm-hmm. And that's all top secret data, and they're, because of the Freedom of Information Act, they're getting stuff coming out, and it should be coming out fairly soon. But they're still working on it.
How far back does our Freedom of Information Act document release date? How far back is that? Like in America, I think it's at 25 years or something?
Okay. Well, it's probably, I think it's a 30-year rule here in Australia.
Okay.
Something like that. Oh, that's brought up another thing. Look, just quickly, I'd like to mention something. This Valentich case, the pilot who disappeared going down to King Island, mm-hmm. When he was talking in the aircraft, talking on the radio, that was being recorded. But the government records all of the conversations for all the pilots and air traffic people. It all gets recorded. They pulled the tape out and they kept it. Now they say that doesn't exist anymore, but at the time, a copy was made for the family and for a couple of researchers. Now the copy that was released only had the pilot Frederick Valentich's voice. They didn't have the air traffic advisor's voice, Steve Roby. His voice wasn't in it at all.
Wow.
Because, I don't know, for some legal reason or something, they just had, the father requested the voice of his son, the last known voice of his son, mm-hmm. to be released mm-hmm. to him. Yep. And so they just gave him that voice, not the other side of the conversation, which is pretty weird. But they did that. Some radio station got hold of it and made a documentary about it. Huh. And they actually made a UFO documentary, and they broadcasted it, and it included that piece of that recording of the pilot saying, "The thing is in front of me right now. I don't know. I can't. It's going so fast. Do you have any military aircraft? All that was part of this documentary, the actual genuine tape, and it was used in this documentary, and that's the reason they made the documentary. Now, it is in the Australian Film and Sound Archives. The 3XY UFO radio special is in there, and I saw it on their list, and I contacted them, and I said, I'd like to come in and listen to it. They said, yeah, sure. They said, we'll just digitise it first, and then you can come and have a listen to it. And I listened to the whole thing, and guess what's missing from that documentary?
What?
Only that part that I wanted to hear, the Valentich part. It's the only bit missing from the documentary.
Really?
That's the reason they made the documentary in the first place.
Wow.
Right? Now, I recently found it listed in the National Archives because another radio station was associated as well. A New South Wales radio station was associated with the making of this show. They used it as well, and they had the real tape in it as well. And so it's listed there, like in the National Archives, under a different name. I found out what the name was, and I've asked them to get that prepared for me to listen to. And I'm going to go and listen to that and see if that's complete or if that's got it missing as well. And I'll find out in the next couple of weeks.
So do you think there remains any copy of the original transcripts audio with including the flight controller?
It's a bit hard to say. I'm pretty sure that the air traffic controller people themselves were so interested in the subject at the time that several of them would have retained their own copies for sure. I don't know if many of them are still alive these days. I mean, that's coming up to 40 years ago. It's 36 years ago that he disappeared this year. I know of a researcher who was given a copy, and he's a personal friend of mine. He won't let me listen to it. And because he was given the tape, he was made to sign a legal agreement that he would do nothing with the tape for 70 years.
What?
70 years. Yep.
That's not fair.
He was told he faces jail.
Yeah.
If his copy of the tape gets out, he faces jail. And it was from 1982 that the radio show, I don't know how it got on this radio program, on the 3XY radio show. It got out in 1982. It was broadcasted. The thing was, nobody was listening to AM radio anymore in 1982 because everybody had switched over to the FM radio stations where the sound was clearer and it was FM. Everyone was listening to FM.
Yeah,
Why would you listen to the old-fashioned AM stuff? So they started making really good documentaries to try to get the listeners back there. It didn't work. I can't find anybody that's recorded the show. Well, there's one guy who used to be in our society who says he's got it on reel to reel, but he won't let anyone listen to it.
Oh.
You know, you could strangle these people.
He's probably been approached and not allowed to do it.
Well, maybe he was scared off. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the archives have it. But interestingly, in the National Archives, if you go to the National Film and Sound Archives and you type in this radio documentary, there's red writing at the top that says may contain restrictions.
Huh.
Now, that was on the 3XY one, and then I went and listened, and there was what I wanted to hear. The Valentich bit wasn't in it, and now that's not there on the listing anymore. It no longer says may contain restrictions. That's interesting.
So it's been digitised and removed, possibly.
Yeah, and I've asked them to do this other one, and I've said to them, you know, you're not going to cut anything out, are you? And they said, oh, no, we don't cut anything out.
Oh,
if there was something missing, it must have been like that when it was brought into us.
Yeah, right.
Well, as a control, I managed to track down the producer of this radio show in Sydney, and he reckons he's got the whole series of tapes out in his back shed, and he's going to digitise it for me anyway. So,
well, fingers crossed. And what I'd like you to do, if you can, if we ever get to the position where you think that something is airable, by all means, contact me through any means, and we'll see if we can put something together. Because this is one of those. This is an historical case. It's like the Battle of Los Angeles. It's like Roswell. It's our Roswell, but without the crashed craft, we've got a missing plane.
Yeah, that's right. Look, it's a waiting game. One thing I've learned about UFO research is it really is a waiting game. You track down the right people, you talk to them, and then you wait and wait and wait and wait for them to actually do something. My sister took photographs on that missing aircraft when she went down to Tasmania, and 2 years before it disappeared. And she gave 4 copies of all the photos. She got 4 copies of prints, gave them to everybody that went on the trip. And, everybody's lost their copies. The pilot of the plane, though, died in a plane crash about 5 years ago. I'm trying to get in contact with his family members to see if they've got a copy of this photo of him flying the plane that my sister took. And it's the dashboard of the missing aircraft.
Oh, wow.
But you try to contact people, they don't want to be contacted, or they don't know who you are, or they don't trust you. Another very frustrating thing I found out trying to track down this farmer. I was trying to ring up a whole lot of people in South Australia to find out, trying to track down the family of this farmer. I was on a lead.
Sorry, guys.
That's
the music. Sorry. Yeah, look, it's been a great couple hours. Thank you very much, George, for coming on. In fact, I think there's probably more talk here for another show, to be honest with you. But yeah, for now, I think the music is playing. So please, guys, be with us next week. And don't forget to donate. And also remember, there's an auction on at the moment that the station is holding. And next week, we probably will have the circle completed regarding the finances we discussed, fiat currency and fractional reserve lending.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.